Welcome to the Both Lives podcast, where we talk about pregnancy, human dignity, and the value of every life before and after birth. We are pro-women and pro-life because both lives matter. In this episode, I am delighted to be talking with Aoife Kelly de Klerk, a girl that's from the same island as me, from a different part of the island, but currently isn't anywhere close, actually. So as we talk with Aoife, we're going to talk about her story that is also actually a bit of a global story, and about the impact of God's direction on her life in the context of helping mummies and abandoned babies in South Africa. So Aoife, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dawn.
It's a pleasure. Let me just first, let's begin with, tell us a wee bit about yourself, about how you came to be in Canada currently, but tell us about your family.
Yeah. So I grew up in Tipperary, a small village called Porto. I was there for 18 years before I left for Scotland to study occupational therapy. So my mom, my dad, and my brother Simon. Simon was the sports star of our family. And I was always the one. I could never connect with anything. Nothing ever fed me deeply. So I did try all the sports. I played piano for 7 years. I played accordion for 5 years. I did the ballet and the Irish dance. I did it all, but nothing was sticking. So I went to university when I was 18 in Scotland, in Aberdeen. And I was there for 4 years. I studied occupational therapy, which I loved and still have very big respect for as a profession. And I would say I had my wildest years as a student, which is a common story, and it doesn't need to be a common story. But it was in that time that I made some really poor decisions with regard to relationships. I would say that I had some very unhealthy decision making when I was a student, fueled by great nights, lots of alcohol. And it was in that time I met someone that was a Christian, but was probably not the best example of a Christian. But it was with him that I ended up in a church and felt for the first time washed over by the Holy Spirit, not understanding it with my mind. It was a much deeper thing that was happening inside of me, beyond consciousness. And a few months later, I was down in Glasgow on a placement, and I moved in with some students who were reckless, taking drugs, and I was just trying to do my placement at the time. And my supervisor said, "Aoife, you're doing great in your placement." She said, "But you really look exhausted." And I said, "I'm not sleeping at all." She said, "I have a family you can move in with. They will Bible bash you. Just ignore them." I was like, got it. Perfect. And when I went actually to the family, the Divines from Glasgow in Scotland, still lifelong friends, the minute that door opened, all I could feel was love. And they had, the dad was sitting down playing music, worship music on his guitar. The mom was making dinner. They were running alpha groups. And I suppose that was my first time encountering, like, we were raised Catholic, but, we wouldn't identify as Christian, or that conversation just never came up. So this encounter with love, I would say, before truth even, was a beautiful encounter. And it definitely changed the trajectory of my life. But it wasn't until I moved to South Africa that I genuinely met the Lord. But I'll come back a bit there. So I went to Scotland for 4 years, came back to Ireland for 2 to work in the National Rehab Hospital in brain and spinal injury, which I absolutely loved. And in that year, I entered a competition which won't be widely known, but within the Irish community would be, called the Rose of Tralee.
I think more people know about this than you think, Aoife. I think around the
Do you
world,
think so?
the Rose of Tralee is known.
In any case, so I actually entered it because I just wanted friends in Tipperary, because I had spent 4 years away. I had come back. I was now working in Dublin. And every time I came down to see my mom and dad, I didn't have connection with the community. I didn't play sport, remember? I didn't kind of connect with any of the local activities. So it really was a way for me to find new community in this kind of space that I was in. And I did. In the end, the long and short of it was an amazing experience. I never intended to win it. Took Tipperary to Tralee for the first time in 50 years and won it. I mean, the shock on my face is hilarious. When I look back, I'm just like, everything that was going through here is all on my face. But what it did was, it really just opened up this whole new experience for me. We traveled the world. We went to the White House. We were in Dubai, New Zealand, Australia, Kenya. Really kind of just being an ambassador for Ireland, for our culture and our heritage, our ways of being, and our characters. And I look back now, I'm 41 now, and I look back and I go, how much did I really know about that at 22? But there's something you carry within you, whether you're aware of it or not, that represents you as an Irish person. And that was a real gift and a real privilege. Taxing at the time, but in hindsight, definitely something that the Lord just planned and purposed for a reason. So at the time I had met my husband, which I'm not sure if we'll get to that story, but we'll see. And he was living in London at the time, and I was living in Dublin, and we were getting married in South Africa, and we had been around the world. He had done quite a few trips with me, which was such a gift, and we were trying to decide where should we live. And I just said to him, why can't we go to South Africa? Like, I love South Africa. I lived there for 3 months the year I met him in a township.
He's from South Africa, Aoife. Yeah.
Correct. He's from South Africa. Correct. He was living in London at the time. He's an engineer, so he was living in England when we met, and was just down on holiday and crossing the world's highest bungee jump, which is actually where we met our first conversation. As you do. Convinced him to jump, as you do. My mom said he should have ran away as quick as his two legs could carry him in the opposite direction. If I could do that on day one. But he's a great man. Yeah, Leon is his name, and he's amazing, consistently amazing through all the years and all the highs and lows. He is spot on. But yes, so we then made the decision against all odds. The economy was crashing. We had two stable jobs, decided to leave all the opportunity that the Rose of Tralee had then presented with TV and media, and just left for South Africa to give our marriage the very best chance for a strong foundation, which at 22 was a pretty big kind of, I would say, a rock solid, big decision, and also quite a wise decision, I would say. So we moved to South Africa, and we intended to go for a year. Leon's mom was sick with cancer at the time, which, thank the Lord, she survived, and we had many years thereafter with her. But I went back into the postgrad in management then, because I thought, am I going to practice occupational therapy for the sake of what we thought would be a year? And in the end, that year, we just never had a conversation about leaving again. We stayed for 14 years and fell in love with the place. And we just never had a conversation about, will we ever move back, or should we move on? Or it never came up. 14 years, it never came up. And I think the blessing in that really was that I got to come home to Ireland every year for 6 weeks. And my parents could come down for 3 to 4 months every year as well.
Amazing.
So family is really important for me. And that was a real gift. Yeah. That's how we ended in South Africa.
I love that, and I think there's so many strands in that even as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, speak to maybe decisions that you've made and things that you've done subsequently. So through the Rose of Tralee, it opens the door or a window to the world. So traveling other continents and cultures, meeting Leon from South Africa. Even in Glasgow, actually, as you were talking about the family that then gave you a bed that you could find sleep and rest, and a home. Yes. So and mother's family, mother, home, those strands all knitted together, and obviously then a willingness to follow God's leading. So you end up in South Africa with a background in occupational health. And I know then that in 2018, something very specific happened just 2 kilometers from your house. So you're there, you're with family, you're settled, you're loving it. What was it that happened that changed so dramatically what you were doing?
I would say up until that point when we moved to South Africa, we hadn't been consciously following the lead of God. Like that, we weren't attending a church, we weren't praying, we hadn't, that relationship wasn't there. I had a Bible in my hand that I was reading, which I believe, and that's why I believe in the power of the Word of God. I believe that just by reading it transforms us. Like, I can't explain that to this day. I don't know how it works, but I've seen it time and time again. So it was only when we had got married, and 2 weeks after, we went to Hillsong Church and ended up giving our lives to the Lord. And really that just means is leaning in on the Lord, making him Lord over your life, and kind of committing to a journey of of a relationship with him, and unpacking him and discussing things with him, and not leaning on our own
Yeah.
understanding. And so we kind of committed to that. And so we'd been in church for years at that point, and loved church, vibrant community, full of diversity, which is rare in South Africa. It's a very divided society, historically, but also, in contemporary living, it tends to be, it'll probably take years. And yeah, for things to change there. But the church was full of diversity, people of all different ages, races, backgrounds, colors, cultures. And for me, I think as an Irish person, for me, diversity is everything. I love the richness that
Mhm.
comes with that. I love the differences of opinions, and knowledge shares and ways of being, and I embrace it all. In any case, our church is fantastic. We were involved with like women empowerment workshops in the communities. We were doing that in the city as well. We were doing missions trips. We were serving, hands and feet of the church, whatever it needed to be. But we had just come out of a water crisis in South Africa, which was hectic at the time. So when COVID came, and I don't want to little COVID, but compared to not having water, I, the realness of that was something. But in 2018, exactly, two baby boys were found dead, just 2 kilometers from our house. And I couldn't understand how were they found, like they were found dead where and how does that happen? And with a bit of scratching, and I'd had a lot of close ties in the community at the time with the police and with the organizations on the ground and with the people on the ground, with the people in the township community. And it turned out that it's not uncommon for babies to be abandoned at all, often in South Africa. So, of course, I dug a bit deeper. I'm shocked at what I had heard. I brought it back to my husband. He's a civil engineer. And he goes, it's funny, Aoife, when I was doing my civil engineering training, they said the biggest blocker of trains was babies.
Wow.
Were babies. And that was maybe 15 years ago. And so we kind of put these two together, started scratching a little bit more, found some research that was conducted by a lady of D. Blackie is her name, in 2010, that reported that 3,500 babies are abandoned every year in South Africa. And for every one that's found alive, two are found dead. And I just couldn't wrap my head around that. Like how and why, how and why, and what are we doing, what are we not doing, how what would it take for a mom to get to that point that the only thing that they can think of is to take the baby and put it in a drain, or take the baby and put it in a bin, and take the baby, and all I could think of was the fear and the shame, the fear, the hopelessness that must be all consuming at that point. Could be the only reasonable the only way that someone would come to that,
Hmm.
with a living child in their hands.
Yeah.
So I contacted a lady by the name of Sandy Immelman, and she had set up in 2015. She had set up the Helderberg Baby Safe, which is, and I'll get on to what a baby safe is now, but it was connected to the Crisis Pregnancy Center. So she had set that up as a response to a baby boy being found under a bridge in our local town. So it was a thing, and it wasn't some distant thing, some far off thing, some imaginable thing. It was right here on our doorstep. Police were picking up babies out of bins on the main street. It is a crisis. It's a crisis in South Africa.
Before we talk about then what you did, what strikes me, because really the theme of this season of the podcast is people who have stepped in and stepped up, and in their space are making a difference because they care. What what was it? Because anybody, you would imagine, with a heart would feel horror at the story of those two baby boys. But what made you do more than feel the horror and then hug your own babies, if you had them at that point? I'm not sure, but so many people would feel the horror, be grateful that it wasn't them and it wasn't their family, and then they would move on. Why did you keep scratching and digging and then end up doing?
Yeah, I don't know if I have. That's a good question, and I don't know if I have a straightforward answer for it. I Fundamentally, I believe we're all born for such a time as this. Everybody is born for a reason, for a season, in the time that they're born, with exactly the gifts and talents that they have. And I think the proximity of the issue within the space that I was already working in was close to home,
Mhm.
like geographically, but but here as well. And I think anything that, anything that bothers the father, like the father, but like bothers me. And yet when you ask the question, it makes me consider, well, why this and not that? But that was something that deeply moved me. And I just felt led in the spirit that I have capacity to make a difference here, big, small. I have resources, and what I don't have, I really trusted the Lord He would provide. And He did. It's funny, in preparing for this podcast, I pulled up some old paperwork. It was the first newsletter we sent out, a registry of interest, and the people could kind of log in and just identify what areas they could serve or be interested in. And when I look at the list of what we needed, we like everything is ticked off, and it was beyond at the time what we thought was possible. We needed finances, we needed ambulances, we needed security services, we needed a place, we needed signage, we needed a graphic designer, we needed someone to sponsor our website services and develop it all. Like we needed manna from heaven. We needed it to fall out of heaven, and we just had to trust that would be it. And I just felt this move, this stirring that I couldn't let it go. It wasn't something. Yeah, I'm that kind of way, that I try to, if there is something that moves me, then I try to lean in and not out.
Yeah.
I think as well, with my occupational therapy background, that people used to say to me, gosh, the National Rehab Hospital must be a very depressing place to work. And I was like, gosh, it's not at all, because everybody that's there that's working believes that they can make big or small difference. And so when you come to something, be it work or a problem like that, and you believe you can make a difference, yeah,
And you
it
do.
charges
Yeah.
you, and you
Yeah.
do the work, you do the grind, and you don't do it on your own. That's the other thing. I believed that I had a community around me that would also feel and believe the same, and put not money where their mouth is, but that too.
Yeah.
But that they would kind of come alongside, and they did. It's like Moses,
Yeah.
he needed Aaron and Hur to hold his hands up, and we need people around us that hold their hands up. And I'm grateful to say that was what was provided in the end.
So let's talk about what it was. So you just mentioned a list of things, and you mentioned some of the specifics. So what exactly did you do? What did you find?
Yes. So we found that there were services, but very sparse services, to support women in crisis pregnancies. Sadly, most of support services in South Africa for people on the ground are volunteer run. There's just not a huge financial backing to help people in need when they are found in a crisis pregnancy situation. So there were certain crisis pregnancy centres that existed. Nothing in the whole community that we now operate in. Nothing, like absolutely nothing. And then obviously linked to the abandoned babies, like babies abandoned on the side of the road on a drain. So I spoke with Sandy, who had set up the other baby saver, and I thought, you know what, let's look at putting up a baby saver right in the heart of Macassar, which is the community. So baby savers really are a box. Okay, it can be a standalone a box, or it can be in the wall of a crisis pregnancy centre or a child support organisation. But technically they are illegal, and we'll get onto the kind of legalities now. But the idea is that a mother is in crisis. Oftentimes it's teenage pregnancies, unplanned pregnancies. Literally giving birth in a toilet is the first sign of knowing that they're pregnant. It's that raw.
Yeah.
And not being able to go home. I mean, I have many stories I could tell you, but one of the most common is, I can't take this baby home because I will not have a home to go to if I take this baby home. Many times there's cases of sexual assault within the home. Often the new boyfriend of the mother sexually assaulting the child. Very common story. Can't bring the child home. The risk of rape at home. Don't have provision, don't have milk, don't have nappies. Okay, so in a crisis situation, hopeless, no way out, no way home, no support. We wanted to give these mothers the option to safely relinquish their baby. So not abandon their baby, safely relinquish their baby. So the idea is they would put the baby in the unit, close the door. When the door is sealed, an alarm goes off, and that's a silent alarm. It sends an a notification to our security service, our ambulance, and the responder on call. So there's 7 of us. Okay, I'm in Toronto now, but there's 7 on the ground there that do 2 weekly rotations where they carry the phone and are ready for that signal. Once they arrive there, they commit to arriving within 5 minutes. They open the safe, which is locked. You can't open the safe once the door is closed. It's locked. So we have a key. We take the baby out. We check the baby, and we immediately go to the hospital to get the baby checked, stabilized. We link up there then with the social care worker and the child protection organization, and from that point, they take care of baby. So their duty of care at that point is to try and find the mother, because the heart really is, if you take postnatal depression, hopeless situations where they make a decision in the moment and then later regret it, they want to try and reestablish that connection with the mother. It doesn't happen often where the mom then comes forth, but there is an effort. It goes through the radio and the newspaper, and they try to reestablish connection with mom. If no one comes forward, within 90 days, the baby becomes adoptable at that point. So really it is kind of the end of the road decision. But, we have heard time and time again that the mere existence of the safes in the area, so we've had 11 through the sister safes in our area.
11 babies saved.
11 babies that have come through the safes. But the idea is that they're just there, that they're physically and visibly an option. That it's there, it's an option. That just like Moses's mom, she was in a desperate situation. All of her firstborn Israelites boys were being murdered. She put Moses in a basket, and that's where we got the name Tevah Moshe. Put Moses in the basket and sent the basket down the river. She didn't know what would happen to him, but she chose life for him in that moment, because what was certain in that moment was that he wouldn't have life. So she chose life by putting him in the basket and sending him down. And kind of it's very metaphorical in what the baby savers actually do, is that it gives the child the chance of life.
I think, I think that's beautiful, and I love the name. Linking it to the basket that Moses was put into, because his mum loved him, to save him, to give him a chance at life. And as you said, you've drawn very clearly that distinction between baby abandonment and what this is. This is a mum who feels unable to take the baby home, to keep the baby, but she cares enough to voluntarily relinquish the baby and put them somewhere safe. And you're offering somewhere safe for the baby. You mentioned some legal challenges, or you mentioned that it was illegal.
Yeah, it's actually illegal. The idea of a baby safe or a baby saver. It came from the church. Like back in the day, the church had a hole in the wall, like a big stone kind of cylindrical type thing where you could put the baby in, push the baby in, and it would come out the other side in the church and walk away. So the issues we have in South Africa at the moment are that it's not legal to safely relinquish your baby. So in America, and I think it might be the same in Ireland, but it has to go through all the official channels. This is the thing. But in in America, they have a safe haven law. So that means if you're unable to care for your baby, so you've birthed a baby, either you knew you were going to give birth and now you have the baby, or you didn't know you were going to give birth and now you have the baby. But in that moment you can't take care of this child. Like there's no way, for whatever reason, some of the reasons I've just spoken about. You can actually bring the baby to a police station, a fire station, a hospital, and say, I can't take this baby home. I can't take, for the baby's welfare, I can't take this baby home, or for my own. Like I'm not prepared, I'm not able, I can't do it. Here's the baby, and they take the baby, and they will go through then the necessary processes to make sure that the baby is as well linked up with a social worker, child protection organization. So again, the child has a chance of life. In South Africa, it's illegal. End of story. It's illegal. There are no services. There's no option. So it's either take the baby home or abandon the baby. There is nothing in between. So right now, at this very moment, which is unbelievable that we're actually having this conversation on the 7th of May in 2026, for years, Baby Savers South Africa is being led by Whitney. Whitney. Oh my gosh, her surname is failing me. Whitney. I'll come back to you on that. She is in the High Court in Pretoria. They are in the High Court in Pretoria petitioning to have the Child Welfare Act, for it to be expanded to allow for the
Mhm.
safe relinquishment of babies. Because the police on the ground, they're seeing the children's bodies lying there. They're the ones having to pick them up. It's such a reality, but the legislation doesn't allow for that safe option for these desperate mothers. So they're petitioning now for the next 2 to 3 days to try and see if they can make an amendment to that to allow for the safe relinquishment of the baby. So, because at the moment, if the mom comes and makes that choice and she's seen, so all our savers, none of them have cameras, but we don't know how it all, or someone sees or whatever, she is then prosecuted. So she is jailed for making a life-saving decision for that baby, for her baby in that moment. She's jailed, prosecuted. So yeah, it's a very complex situation.
Certainly, when this episode airs, we will know possibly what has happened. But what strikes me culturally, I mean, I've never been to South Africa. I don't know the
Mm,
country. I don't know the culture.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
but there are some sort of elements within the context of pregnancy crisis that transcend culture and country. There are others that are very different, and legislation can look different. But at its core, we have women who are in crisis. At whatever point they realize they're pregnant and that crisis develops, they need options available to them. From our perspective, we want life affirming and life saving options for both lives, for the mum and the baby. So you've already outlined that in South Africa, um, the context of vulnerability, abuse, the inability to take the baby home for so many of these young women and girls, but that it's illegal to relinquish the baby voluntarily like this. But the other aspect, when we were preparing, um, you had mentioned about the number of illegal migrants, I suppose, in South Africa who are stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Mm.
So, how does that play a factor in all
Yeah.
of this?
Yeah, so this is both a personal thing and something that is a real situation down there. So they say there's over 10 million, that's a conservative estimate, illegal people in South Africa, mainly coming from neighboring countries and coming for work so that they can work, so they can send the money back home to feed their families. Oftentimes, moms come to South Africa, leave their children there, come to work because they are able-bodied, because they're young, they're energetic. They come to work so that they can feed their mom, their dad, and their children. So
Mhm.
oftentimes it's the grandparents that are raising back home. Yeah. So they're down in South Africa not by choice. It's not a lifestyle choice. They are down to work to provide to keep their family alive, which must be just a hectic situation. And we had beautiful ladies working for us at home through the years, and it was always the same story. They were down to fund the family back home. So, yes. However, if you give birth in South Africa, if you're illegal, so they're down illegally, but if you give birth illegally, if you're illegal in South Africa and you give birth, you cannot get paperwork for your child. You cannot get a birth certificate, therefore you cannot get a passport, therefore you cannot, like, how does one exist as a human on the earth without a birth certificate and a passport? You need it for every single thing you will ever need. Not only that, it's a challenge because then the mom actually can't work themselves, um, or they can't bring the baby home over the border legally. It's extremely complex. So, and I had my own experience of that, carrying Tig in 2018. It was just on the lead up to actually establishing the Baby Safe as well, where my temporary residence expired while I was waiting for my permanent residence. So the system isn't great in South Africa. I had applied in 2015 and I had heard nothing back, but I assumed it would come through because, the system is set up and that's how it works. And it doesn't always work like that, especially in Africa, in any case. And I love the continent of Africa. Hear me well, hear me well. But yes, without a response, I just assumed it would be okay. And eventually I became illegal. I was then pregnant with Tig illegally. So I was not a legal resident in the country. So if I give birth to Tig, he would have not got a birth certificate and he would have not then got a passport, which would have meant that I could not leave South Africa. which was a huge issue because we traveled every year to my mom and dad, to our family. We were always traveling.
But you were on a pathway to legality, you know, whereas so for so many of these women, they're not on that pathway. And you had the resources
Correct.
and the knowledge and the community around you to support you. And even you were stressed by the circumstance.
Yeah, my point exactly. So actually, in the reality of it is that although, and I can never say that I can walk in anyone else's shoes. I would never would never have that assumption. But I can just, if I can just begin to imagine, like a grain of sand in the desert, what those women are facing in that moment. So yeah, so I can relate, but I can't relate. But if I had my loving husband, my loving family, supportive, I had finance to leave the country if I had to, despite all the unknowns. But my heart bleeds because, if that was my experience and it was completely overwhelming and terrifying, what on earth could a woman who has no husband, has no home to go home to, has no money for food for themselves, never mind the child, who fears the rape within the family or the community, like I can't imagine. I cannot imagine. So for me, that it was that duty of care to set something up that can give a life-giving option to a mother in a desperate situation that I can or cannot relate to, but that would be there as an option to give the child a chance of life.
And maybe in some ways it speaks to the question that I asked as to why you didn't turn away. Do you know, because you were experiencing on some level, in some measure, you could empathize in a way that other people maybe wouldn't or couldn't. And I'm also thinking of the sense of injustice. Not that I mean, these are massive issues and it's very complex. And I certainly don't have the answers for how all of those different factors could be resolved. But there's a sense of injustice and there's a heart of compassion and you have your faith at the core, which altogether means that you want to respond with the love of the father. You talked about the father's heart and the father's love earlier. um, what does it look like coming from Ireland? There are obviously many differences in culture, in history. But like I said, there are some things that transcend. So pregnancy involves two lives. Pregnancy crisis can happen for many different reasons. The law responds in different ways to legalize abortion or it restricts abortion. It limits choices for women in the supports that are available to them. Or I would say on these islands, it's prioritizing now one support in quotes, which is abortion, and other supports aren't provided in the same way to enable women to choose life and live life with their babies in a way that serves both of their well-being. But that's just my little sort of thinking. What would you say are some of the similarities in the response that we as church are offering or
Mm,
need to offer to women in
mm,
pregnancy crisis, whether it's Ireland,
yeah.
whether it's South Africa?
Yeah. I would say, well, for me, I would say, what kind of support are the women getting on the ground when they find out that they are pregnant? What happens there? Because I know that oftentimes abortion is sold as the quick and the easiest solution to your problem now. But what I don't think is sold or shared is that the decision they make in that moment will have lifelong consequences. But that every decision that they make around abortion is that it's a quick fix. And one of my dear friends, several of my dear friends, have had abortions and have had lifelong struggles trying to overcome them. And thank God for the gospel, because without the gospel, I don't think they would have the healthy life that they have now and the way of seeing things and forgiveness and finding a way forward. But she was told that it was similar to getting a tooth out. So I suppose when you're not in the situation, you might think, how on earth did an intelligent woman believe that to be true in that moment. But I think the thing is that we don't take account is the fear of the unknown, the potential shame, the guilt, the all of these things that are loaded and clouding um, one's decision making, patterns of thinking, and vision for the future, life trajectory, all of these things. And so I suppose for me, it all comes back to narratives. What are the stories that are being spun? What are the stories that are fed either financially, what are the agendas that are pushing these certain things, and how do we counteract that with the kingdom of God way of doing things, which is love in truth, truth in love, and not one without the other. But I think as long as that whole idea of, well, it's just a cluster of cells, like it is just like getting a tooth out, you'll be, that you're fine, and this will be the quickest way to solve your problem. The sad reality is that it is not just a cluster of cells, and that there is life at the core of that. And I think, that we potentially as a church and as a children of God, all with our, sin and sackcloth, that really we have a duty of care to one another. So how can we support one another? How can we love one another, but not love without truth? Because that's also a recipe for a disaster. So what is happening? And I know in Ireland they have that 3-day pause at the moment, which I'm in full support of keeping that there, because in the
Yeah,
moment.
let's just explain to people maybe who don't understand what that looks like, because Ireland's unique in the context of the islands that form, the UK and Ireland, because there is a mandatory 3-day wait period between initially seeking an abortion and then having the abortion procedure or beginning the abortion procedure. And we have stats from some organizations, including the Pro-Life Campaign, who are very robustly saying that up to 1 in 6 women aren't completing or returning for their abortion because of
Mm,
the 3-day wait period. So since 2019, when the law was changed, thousands of babies have been born whose mothers did initially go to take up an abortion appointment. Um, but activists in Ireland are seeking to overturn and repeal that 3-day wait period, and legislation for Northern Ireland, England and Wales and Scotland would seek to prohibit any sense of a mandatory wait period. So it's a really good example of where supports and services really push women on one trajectory towards abortion.
absolutely. Yep. And kind of just on that point as well about the supports, for me, I think as an artist, I'm interested in what supports are actually there, what material is put into the hands of the mothers at that point. Like, is it robust? Is it thorough? Is it life-giving? Like, is it making room for conversation? Is it making room for empathy and for trust? Is it making room for them to think wider or longer about that decision that now sits on their lap? And so that interests me to know what is the quality of that material, and what is the foundation of that material that really is informing their decision at that vulnerable point.
I love, and I was just looking because you'd sent something through, and I'm looking for it here in my notes, and of course can't see it as I'm looking, but you were talking about oh, I've just found it. So information can be bare facts, but with your artist's heart, you're seeking a heart response, not just bare facts. And you give a little quote in your email to me: when the eyes see what they have not yet seen, the heart feels what it never felt. So in the context of changing narratives and social transformation, cultural transformation, and using art, let's move to that part of your story. So you're no longer, we've already mentioned a couple of times, you're not in South Africa currently. um, the skills that you bring to the life space. Your connection with South Africa remains, it always will be, but you're using different skills now, and you're using your art as a tool for transformation. So how does that connect to the life space and the advocating for life?
Yeah, so when I was in South Africa, I had been looking up fine art photography courses, and there was only one available in Paris and one available in Ireland. So when this suggestion for a move came back in 2021, and the two places that were on the cards were Paris and Ireland, which is so crazy because it was the only two places in Europe that had this course. And the interesting part about it is, and it's kind of how we kind of came in contact, was that the one course was up at the University of Ulster in the Belfast School of Art. So it was a fine art photography course up there. And I really felt on my spirit that I needed to eat and drink in of it in a physical sense as well, and not from distance learning. So when we moved to Ireland, it did provide the opportunity quite quickly to be able to engage in that. And I suppose that gave me a language. Like, photography has become a language through which I can communicate and express and give revelation to my own encounters or my own experiences or revelations or learnings that I've had through my life. So it's been a real gift, I would say, especially in moving continents, not just once, but twice thereafter. It's really given me great solace. It allows me a space to pray and to consider and to reimagine. So, but I also just really appreciate the power of an image to tell a story. And I think really in complex scenarios like this, I'm currently reading a book by Professor de Klerk. It's called Human Bridge, and it's based on apartheid in South Africa and the very difficult situations and how we are bridging divides. But how do we create space for kind of a multitude of truths to exist in the space that fosters then communication, empathy, trust, that then we can co-create a way forward together. And so as an artist, and in talking about kind of new life, is that I suppose how do we how are we light bearers? How do we bring light into the darkness? Reach how do we reach people in love and in truth? And again, that's why arts are so helpful, because it transcends language from a traditional sense, in that word for word, and there's so much in between. Sometimes art can they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Sometimes art can move people into a space to contemplate and meditate, and to be open to other possibilities. And I think it goes back to really storytelling as well. So there's a great Instagram account called Stranger on the Bench, and I love it because it started off with a guy just sitting beside a random stranger on a bench and having these life conversations. And there's no photography, there's no videography. It's actually illustration, digital illustration, and it just captures this story of this person, whatever they choose to share. And I remember thinking about it a year and a half ago, thinking, gosh, that would be amazing if you could give the autonomy to the person who's willing to share the story, to share their story of what they've journeyed through, without the risk or the fear of it being, released into the world, and whatever judgment and condemnation comes with it, but actually a safe space to share, in the hope that the one in the crisis doesn't feel alone, that they know that, because in situations, I believe you feel like you're the only person in the world that's ever done something bad, or you've ever, you're the only person in the world that's come to this crisis or this decision, or, you've made a bad decision, gosh, I'm the only person in the world. But the truth is, there are billions of people in the world over the history of time that have reached the same decision as you have. And to have those life affirming narratives of, yes, it was difficult. Yes, I felt shame. I felt guilt. I felt it. But actually, here there was a turning point. Something interrupted the trajectory. And for me, for example, it was the gospel, or it was a friend, or it was a cup of tea, or it was someone that could come in and share, that I could share vulnerably with. And Dr. Brene Brown, she talks about empathy, and it's that ability to feel with someone without judgment and share perspectives. So it's like, in those spaces where people are making these life changing decisions, is there space created where they can feel safe to share, where they will feel listened to, without judgment, that hope might be pointed to, and that life might be brought into the darkness.
I love that. Yeah, yeah, and I think in the life space, we could be talking about and both lives in pregnancy
Mm,
crisis. We're talking about women in the pregnancy facing the crisis. We're talking about women post the birth or post the abortion, and however they've been left. And in every aspect of that, art can be used to inspire, to bring hope and joy, help them share their stories and tell their stories. It can bring them to a connection with God. Um, it can bring them to a point of where they recognize the Father's heart of love for them. And actually, thinking about fathers and mothers, we also, just before we went on, started recording, we were talking about compassion, and actually the starting of um, Tevah Moshe was an act of compassion. You know, your stomach churned when you heard about the baby boys that had been abandoned. And then we were talking about how in Hebrew, the Hebrew word for compassion, rachem, is literally like your gut churning. It's that visceral, that's how God feels for us as compassion. But the root is the same as the Hebrew word for womb. So the Father's heart is actually shown to us in the sense of a mother's protective love in the womb. And so when it comes to then mothers and babies, we have so many strands in scripture that reveal God's heart for both lives. And then as I'm listening to you and the story of your life that is ongoing, how you have stepped in and are modeling that father heart and that protective nature in the womb, because you're striving to serve women and their children who are in such need, and now using art for that. The other thing I don't want to let you forget, but I didn't actually really catch what you were saying, something about a theatre project.
oh yeah, sorry, yeah. So kind of how we've used art, I suppose,
Yeah.
with regard to the baby savers is we've partnered with a really lovely organization that are on the ground in South Africa called Out of the Box. And they have kind of heard our heartbeat behind it and have been able to commission works, which actually came from Irish funding, actually, which is such a gift of the generous nature. It's a testament to the generous nature of the Irish. But they, no, but genuinely, Irish people are wonderful, generous people. I love Irish people. But and for more than that, by the way, I love how Irish are full of fun and how they don't take themselves too seriously and how we embrace. There's a many things I could talk about that, but in any case, so the Out of the Box commissioned these artists, local artists, which again, there's so much richness there. You know, local artists that are trying to choose away from the gangs, away from the drugs, away, and to kind of plug them into kind of creating this beautiful artwork. So we looked at high traffic areas, and they developed artwork that then was painted on these high traffic areas, so that there could be great visibility, pointing women in need to the rape centres, to the crisis pregnancy centres, to all of the supports that exist and the savers. So again, communicating, making it visible, making it known, kind of trying to kind of outroot the stigma of it all as well. I mean, stigma is enormous as well in South Africa. And I think in Ireland. I mean, I was growing up. I remember if you got pregnant, it was the worst thing in the world. Do you know? But what a narrow-minded
Mhm.
thought. You know, like but that was the narrative. You know,
Just sort of to butt in quickly there, I was talking
yeah.
to a friend not that long ago. I have daughters, she has daughters, and we were talking about maybe an unexpected pregnancy. And
Mm,
she, her response was
mm,
quite sort of horrified at the very
mm,
thought. And I said to her, do you know, there are many worse things that one of my daughters could come home and tell me other than that she's unexpectedly pregnant. So yes, back to those strands. Things can look different culturally and legally, but actually those strands of stigma, shame, families who don't support their daughters look very similar. And then, like you said, using art to challenge narratives, to inspire hope.
Yeah, but just to come back to that point as well, just with regard to being you're a mother, I'm a mother,
Mm.
I always say to our children, we are raising you in a certain way, okay? We're raising you in a certain way, but in the end, it is you that will make your decisions and it is you that will carry the consequences. I said, but never, ever, ever let it be that you find out you're pregnant or that you've made some other girl pregnant and you can't come home and tell us. I said, you come back home, you tell us, we will sit down, we'll work it together. Yes, it might not be what you look like, but our home is open. We love you. We like believe every child is, even if it's not planned by us, it's planned by God. There's a plan and purpose for that child's life, as there is a plan and purpose for your life. And ultimately, God knows better. Like we have this idea of what a perfect life should look like. And in the end, God's like, whatever about all that, that I actually have a higher way if you'll trust me in it. And that's the big thing about trust. And I think that's why my heartbeat really sits on the gospel, because it is beyond our own understanding. And that's my heart, is that the youth of the world hear the gospel at a young age, so that when they come to these life changing decisions, or that they already have the gospel inside of them, and that they know that God will work all things for good, even if you can't see it with your eyes, that they have a trust in a father that they know loves them and will take care of them. He says, I'll never leave you, I'll never abandon you. And if you look at the birds, they don't worry about where they get their food. He provides for them, and having that same trust in him, because how much more does he love us than the birds in the sky? So in any case, I just had to make that point, because I feel like there's an obligation to share that, that as a mother, we to open these conversations that I think culturally were long held in the dark and not discussed. Like, we talk about everything. I don't know what your audience's age is, but there's all the terms for all the body parts we talk about. There's nothing that is an uncomfortable topic. And sometimes when I'm making the dinner and the conversation's happening behind me, my eyes are crossing and I'm going, oh, jeepers, please help me in this moment. I
Yeah.
cringe, but I think there's a beauty in it. That everything is just cracked open, the lights in, we talk about all the things, we journey through the questions and the answers. And ultimately there's that message of that God loves you, and he plans everything for a reason, a season, and a purpose, and all as well. So in any case, back to the art. Yes, so that's that. At the moment, we are working with the Out of the Box charity on the ground there as well. They're great because they're on the ground all the time. And there is a gentleman that was in Lion King on Broadway that's actually after moving back to South Africa now and in our community. And we're trying to put together a traveling theatre piece, because again, the arts can bridge things that language often can't. To help to educate through the school system, these play out these scenarios of, a woman finds out she's pregnant and what, whether, what all these different scenarios. But I just think it's beautiful, because theatre is more than just entertainment, as well as is photography, as is art, as is music. It can be deeply moving and deeply life changing if we allow it to be.
Do you know, Aoife, as we sort of draw the conversation to a close, and just sort of maybe try and sort of draw some of these strands together, what really inspired me to talk to you was just how I think in this conversation, which has been so, in many ways, wide ranging, because it reflects your life journey, but there's a lot of things that people can, I think, relate to. And I think for me, what I want people listening to hear is, do you know what? I maybe will never be in South Africa to do that. But here's a woman who was an occupational therapist, is now an artist, has been in Ireland, has been in South Africa, is now in Canada, and was at one stage, a young student, and now is a mum of teenagers. And it doesn't matter, wherever we are, whatever gifts we have, whatever season of life we're in, we can serve, and we can seek to live out the Father's heart, which is one of compassion for both lives and pregnancy. But tying that into being mothers or parents, we can't actually, with any integrity, talk about the Father's love for his image bearers if we as parents aren't modeling that to our own children. So you might never be in a place where you think, I need to step in and find a charity, a non-profit that will serve women, like a pregnancy crisis center or the Baby Saver boxes. But whoever you are, you will be able to have a conversation with your children or with a friend or with a sister that will be life affirming and will say there are other options. Do you know, and for anyone listening, we bring our skills, we bring our heart, we bring our life circumstance into this space. And really, that's what we want from this podcast, to profile individuals like yourself who are serving very tangibly and doing amazing things. But it has to apply to every single person listening, that they themselves can do something in their space.
And I think that's kind of the biggest misconception is one day when I have time and when I have space, I will be able to do something. But actually, I genuinely believe the first and most important ministry space is at home.
Yeah.
It is at home with your children. Like that is, if that's not first, there's no point in being out in the world. There's actually no point in being out in the world. And that's not to say that I have it perfect at home either. I'm not, we all have our struggles. When we moved to Canada, I threw a hot potato at the wall. So sometimes,
Why?
in a
Maybe we
moment
don't
of
need to know the
madness,
why.
no, in a moment of madness. And the point is, I don't want to paint a picture for anybody to think, oh, she has that all together, so she can talk like that or do that. That's not the truth. Like, we're all like, going through life. We all have taxes to pay. We all have complications with work, family, neighbors, friends, whatever it is. There's no perfect place or time where you'll arrive at and feel like, oh wow, like I am all together. But it's through the lens of the Father that says, you know what, I see you as you are. I see your heart, and will you give me your little? Will you give
Mm-hmm.
me your loaves and fishes, and let me multiply it? And that's the beauty of this is coming as we are
Mm-hmm.
and serving as we are with what we have. It's he always puts on my heart, what little you have in your hand, that's enough. And I genuinely believe it, because as a in the natural and in the human, we want to be perfect. We strive to be perfect before we'll do anything, but we'll never be perfect. We'll never arrive, and that's that whole journey of living out your faith, is that you get up, you work with the Lord, you walk with the Lord, you trip, you stumble, you get back up, you walk with the Lord, you trip, you stumble, you get back up, you walk with the Lord. And it's the story of grace. It's a scandal of grace that time and time again he will pick us up. He'll tell us, "Look up, child. Let's go. Let's carry on." And I would say that the journey of faith is not possible without the Word of God, like literally the Bible, because it defines everything about how we think, how we feel, how we respond. And without that, we don't have a blueprint to follow. We kind of are just, So for me, it is only possible through the word and the grace of God. So yeah, I hope that comes through to everyone, that everyone has been born for such a time as this, has been given unique gifts and talents, and the Lord says, fan into the flame the gifts and talents. And even that idea of repent, like, come think like me. Let's come think like him about ourselves, that we might find ourselves in a position to serve, to speak a life-giving word, to make a cup of tea, to open up our front door, to carry a cake, to whatever it is, carry a flower, to, I don't know, pick a kid up that's fallen, just to live out as it is in heaven, let it be on earth. Let us be the hands and feet of God on the earth for the good for the good of the whole world, actually. If we can make a difference in the spheres that we've been placed in, big, small, indifferent, that it truly would be a different place.
I love that. And I usually finish with a question, but actually you've answered it. I was going to ask, if you could imagine better for South Africa and Ireland in
Mm,
the space of the pregnancy crisis and lives at risk, what would that look like? But
mm,
actually, in what you've just said, you were talking about personal transformation that leads to social
sure,
transformation.
sure.
And actually, when you were speaking, I don't know whether you know this song, but this is how I'm going to conclude our
I like it.
conversation, because right at the start I asked you why you didn't just
Mm-hmm.
look away,
Mm-hmm.
and think, thankfully that's not my family. And as you were talking, it reminded me. of a song called Back to God by Reba McEntire and Lauren Daigle. And the lyrics, the first couple of lines are, "Oh, have you looked around? Have you heard the sound of mama's crying? Or do you turn away when you see the face of the innocent dying? In these darkest days, are you not afraid that it's too late? You got to get down on your knees, believe, fold your hands and beg and plead. Keep on praying." And it goes on. But it just made me think of what your story has been, that you have shared with us, that you didn't look away. You heard the sound and you stepped in. So thank you, Aoife, for sharing with us. Thank you for all that you have contributed to our podcast.
Hello and welcome to the part of the episode where we listen to and respond to your comments and questions. We talk about the cultural conversations that we're having here in the office as a team, and we let you know what you can look forward to next time on the next episode of the Both Lives podcast. Dawn, before we start, how are you feeling? How's your voice?
Yeah, just before we hit record, I was coughing and spluttering again, but not too bad. May is here. It can't go on for any longer, much longer.
Well, this week we have a really amazing comment to share, so hopefully this will make you feel better. So this is from one of our listeners, Kate, and I'm just going to read what she said. So she said, "Your podcast is amazing. I was particularly struck by your conversation recently about baby adoption, especially how changes in laws such as kinship care, which may appear the best option for mothers on the surface to keep a child within a family, isn't actually always the best thing for the child or even what the mother might want. Thank you for all you do at Both Lives and for bringing a different voice to the abortion debate." And before we respond, we just want to say thank you so much, Kate, for taking the time to email, and to everyone that sends us messages and questions. It really does mean the world to us as a team. But Dawn, would you like to respond to Kate's words?
I think, similar to you, just thanking Kate for getting in touch is always really encouraging. But very affirming, because it's exactly what we want to do with the whole of the initiative, the Both Lives initiative, and with this podcast. We want to talk about the breadth and the depth of the issues related to pregnancy crisis and abortion, and bring something different to that space, a voice that speaks for women and for life, and a voice that talks about the three pillars of laws that protect life, services that enable lives to be chosen, and a culture that affirms every life. So the ability to hear from listeners or supporters in any way that sort of affirms what we're doing and how we're doing it is just so good to hear.
And if this is your first time listening to the podcast and you're not familiar with the terms pro-both, or rather the voice that we bring to this, in the very first episode of this podcast, we explore those pillars and we look at exactly what it means to be pro-both, which will explain the lens that we approach every conversation that we have. And speaking of having those conversations, another listener had got in touch to actually reach out to ask us to help them further equip them in having really good conversations in their space. So they had been asked to prepare a talk around abortion, around pro-both issues, and they came to us as an organisation to ask for further tools and resources to help them deliver this talk really well. If you'd like to expand on that, Dawn.
Well, yeah, first of all, anybody, if we can help them in any way, look at our website, follow us on social media, sign up to our newsletter. But if there are specific tools that they are seeking and are struggling to find, we might not have them, but we want to help address the needs that are brought to us and that we see. And actually, it reminded me, if we sort of launch off that, from that into the news story that caught my eye over the weekend. So I think for Mother's Day, it's obviously not the UK Mother's Day, but in America and much of the world, Mother's Day was Sunday past. And in America, a government website was launched called moms.gov. and it's signposting to supports, information, resources for women and families relating to pregnancy and unplanned pregnancy. Actually talking about before you get pregnant, advice for during pregnancy, post-pregnancy, and birth, everything from safe sleeping to financial savings for your children, dietary advice. And what really stood out was that it officially sanctions, put it that way, pregnancy resource centres and signposts to them, as well as federally funded healthcare providers. And we don't have anything like that in the UK. In fact, such signposting to those pregnancy resource centres is opposed in the UK. And actually, just a few years ago, there was an investigation, and where the NHS had been signposting to private pregnancy resource centres, they were criticised as being dangerous, harmful, providing misinformation, disinformation. We've seen terms such as rogue providers being used by the NHS. And I mean, we want to make clear that not everybody offers the same supports, and where there is misinformation or disinformation, it should of course be called out, and the NHS shouldn't be linked to such providers. But the difference between this new US website and what we have in the UK is really, from our perspective, that the NHS signposts primarily to abortion providers, the state-funded providers that are meant to be non-judgmental, non-directive in the context of an unplanned or unexpected pregnancy, are the abortion providers themselves. And as we said when we responded to the Scotland abortion law review, and are continuing to do so, one of our concerns was in the area of pathways and signposting information for women. And we said in one of those submissions that we made that women should not be required to trawl through the internet searching for trustworthy information and available supports as they try to decide between continuing with or indeed terminating their pregnancy. Particularly, as I've said, as pregnancy centres outside of the NHS are presented as harmful and rogue. And, you know, the RCOG, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, made a really interesting comment as part of that investigation into those external providers just a few years ago in the UK. And they said that high quality and non-judgmental information and advice about abortion should be made available. And that's exactly it. We're talking about centres that offer so much more than abortion, and yet the NHS and government policy seems to be directed towards one choice, supporting women to make one choice in pregnancy. And as with this US website, we think a lot more could be done to frame, shape, create a system that is pro-choice in the fullest sense. So not just about one choice, and that's abortion. So yeah, it was a great news story. Obviously, it's a very different system and country, but we think something similar could be done in the UK.
Mm-hmm. And you covered two topics there actually that we looked at in season 1 of the podcast. So in one of the episodes, a compassionate response to pregnancy, crisis, loss and abortion, and also the conversation of what it's like in a post-Roe America, if you want to look at it through a US lens as well. All the episodes of season 1 are available to stream now, and as you can tell from this conversation that we're having, we've already covered a really large breadth of topics, and we're so glad that we're able to signpost you in that way. But speaking of podcast guests that we have had and conversations that you've had with people, Dawn, a little bit closer to home, we are delighted to share a good news story from one of our season 1 guests, Dr. Dermot Carney, and the amazing work that he does in abortion pill reversal. Earlier on in the week, he had tweeted, "I am very pleased to report the birth of another beautiful baby girl in the south of England on the 6th of May, whose mother reached out and received abortion pill reversal treatment in early pregnancy after regretting that she had taken mifepristone. at least 77 UK abortion pill reversal babies have now been born, which we just celebrate this incredible news. And we posted about this on social media. We take a screenshot of the tweet, and we had just said this is incredible news that these women were given true choice, that they were given the ability to choose life for their unborn baby. And this news was just incredible. We really wanted to celebrate it. And what was so affirming and encouraging, especially in the landscape of social media, which can be so toxic in this debate, and somewhere that we always try to bring clarity and hope and wisdom to these conversations, was this amazing response that it got in terms of engagement of other people celebrating this, maybe encountering some of this terminology for the first time. But we were so thankful that we were able to take that opportunity, not only to celebrate the work that Dr. Dermot Carney has done, but also the life of this baby girl and of her mother. So it was really encouraging to see on social media people celebrating this good news story.
Yeah, and I think maybe tying it into, where we finished with the previous subject, that it's such a shame when ideologies take over and evidence and medicine is sort of left behind, so again, sadly in the UK, the NHS, the Department of Health, the Royal College of Obstetricians and gynecologists have shown a real unwillingness to engage with the area of abortion pill reversal, not even to the degree of monitoring. We've now had, it must be about 8,000 babies born worldwide, safely delivered after the mum has engaged with an abortion pill reversal treatment. In the UK, as you said, we've now had 77 babies born. At the very least, the Department of Health and the NHS, the doctors who care for us in pregnancy, should be looking at this treatment and considering how women in the UK could avail of it through the NHS. That would be amazing.
Yeah. So looking forward to the next episode, Dawn, what can our listeners / viewers expect from the next episode of the Both Lives podcast?
Yeah, we will be talking to an individual who was adopted as a baby, continuing the theme, I suppose, of adoption that sort of has actually come about in this season. We weren't, actually expecting it. So looking forward to that conversation, their experience of adoption and why they reached out to us. So it'll be a good conversation to have.
Amazing, and we really hope that you will join us for the next episode. Like I said, all episodes of season 1 are available to stream now, and you can catch up on season 2 wherever you get your podcast. You can find more information about today's episode in the show notes, as well as links to our monthly newsletter and our social media, so go and check those out, and make sure that you subscribe or follow this podcast on whatever platform you're using so that you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.